Perhaps I'm a little biased being working for a land-grant school like Michigan State, but my first knee-jerk reaction is the Cooperative Extension Service. Every county has extension office. Most counties are represented. I'd have to think about some of the more urban ones, but most counties are represented by extension specialists who, as the name would imply, have added expertise and abilities in specific areas. And in Michigan, we have those who are certainly are specialists in terms of livestock and basic husbandry of animals. A lot of these skills are taught through, of all places, things like 4-H, which is also related to extension. I would say, for instance, if people had children and they want to try to explore, be it chickens or rabbits or sheep, goats, even the odd backyard steer, probably an excellent place to start would be get them enrolled in 4-H, because everybody thinks of 4-H in the movies with the county fair and the blue ribbons. 4-H is much more than that, but at least on the level of animal husbandry, it's an organization that promotes not only some of the personal values, but more importantly, I think from a husbandry standpoint, how to care animals. You'll get outside speakers to come in, and this is how these are the common diseases. I used to do this when I was in practice, talk about common diseases in rabbits, and would give talks to the organization so they could help recognize that. What is basic husbandry? So organizations like that, if they live in a rural area, if they're fortunate enough and they have a vocational agricultural program that's tied into Future Farmers America, again, maybe encourage your kids it won't be a bad expenditure time at all to spend a semester a year in their VOAG program at the high school. Now, those are educational, I think, arenas for younger people. But getting back to adult, quote-unquote, needs, or people who might have children, then I think, again, the extension service is there. That can range everywhere from just a phone call to, as you mentioned earlier, there's handouts, newsletters, they have web pages. They can certainly direct you. There are certainly, the USDA has a lot of information available online at various sundry web pages. There are organizations. If I were going to get in the business of having a few backyard sheep for wool, or raising lambs for meat, or chickens, I would certainly look up, and we're well covered in many states, certainly in Michigan, but I know in others, for dairy goat associations or sheep raisers associations, and connect with them and go to their annual meetings. They will, yes, there's going to be, as any other organizational group, the election of officers and banquets and awards, but they generally have, I've spoken to some of these as well, they'll have a day or a half day or more dedicated to continuing education, if you will. Also there, I think, probably more so than all the other things I mentioned, just to get, especially if you're a beginner, just to get among some of the other raisers and say, hey, I'm seeing this in my chickens, or I'm seeing this in my sheep. What do you think this is? What do you do for this? Or I read that my goats may have X disease. How do you handle that? Or I have goats going through the fence. What do you find is the better fence to use for this? All these little practical how-tos that I'm not even sure you can find necessarily in a book or handouts or even a web page. It is, I sometimes joke when I went into my first year in practice, being from more of an urban area, that I learned more about farming and how to be a veterinarian among cattle from the farmers than I could have in 20 years of going to school, with the veterinary clinicians. It's just because of the hands-on knowledge these people have, and that's what I alluded to earlier, how we have this generational. When you look at the average age of a farmer in this country, we're really in a crisis of this generational loss of information. So I certainly encourage people who want to try, give a hand at raising some of their own food, and if they get into livestock or poultry, but try to connect if they can at some of these meetings, county level, state level, whatever they can do to just connect with the hands-on know-how that is very difficult sometimes to get from other sources. It wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt. I guess I'm a little biased here again, but it wouldn't hurt for you to call your local vet. Now, you'll have to discern, depending upon where you live, on the edge of suburbia, or is it more rural or more urban. Like anything else, we as veterinarians tend to gravitate towards our practice interest, and that tends to help decide where we live. You may be challenged a little bit with, in some areas, depending where you live, finding a veterinarian who's able to deal with your species, especially if they're more of a small animal owner. However, I think most veterinarians are quite comfortable with the basic husbandry of what animals need. But you may have to do a little shopping around, find a vet who at least can give you some information or steer you to some information on how to, okay, you're going to raise Boer goats for meat, for instance, maybe to the association, the Boer Goat Association, or this is what I know about goats, or here. They might even steer towards a basic textbook on goat diseases, and say go online, go to Amazon, and they might be able to help you find a resource like that. If somebody wanted to raise, let's say, sheep, for instance, maybe they should find a sheep flock owner somewhere and go work with them, especially during the lambing season. We do this with veterinary students for a week or two, and just so you can go through everything that goes wrong. Lambs that die, lambs that don't make it alive, ewes that have problems. But that might be the best way to learn how to raise a certain species. Go to somebody who's in the business and work with them for a while just to learn the ins and outs. You might, so many other professions and industries call it internship. I don't think it's any different. Yeah, it's true. There are a few farms that wouldn't want an extra pair of hands for a week or two to help making crops, help with the feeding. But can you think of a better way? We get some of our better veterinary students who are interested in agriculture anyway, for instance, who've spent time here working at the university farm, who've milked cows, who've worked on a farm, who've fed, worked for minimum wage, or in some cases maybe for the experience. But as I was alluding to earlier, there's no better teacher than experience, and just to get the hands-on, that gap between people who are new and the older farming generation, so to speak, who know some of these things, that gap can certainly be closed considerably by spending time with somebody like that. I can't think of hardly any other profession you wouldn't want that anyway.